Okay, now what we're going to do is create some value scales, and but based on colors that we're going to use for the painting. Now, to analyze what colors we want to use, we could take a look at the um, image here, and we see a green, a blue. There seems to be a little yellow here, and then there seems to be a little more of a warmer blue, a blue that's a little more towards ultramarine, or even a slight teeny bit of magenta, a teeny bit. But that isn't the dominant issue. But we're going to try to think what would be the best colors to use. So um, what I'm going to do is load up my colors in my palette based on what I think I need for this. So first of all, this blue here. And this is a little more of a cobalt blue or a phthalo blue. And so I'll get my colors here, and then um, here's a phthalo blue. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to use that. But if you have a cobalt blue, you could use that. It's ultramarine blue is a little bit more purplish. So this really reads more as more of a green blue or a phthalo blue. Then I want to use, there's a yellow here, but it's not a super bright yellow. So instead of like a lemon yellow, I think I'll go ahead and use this permanent yellow deep or a medium yellow. Put that in there. Um, then there is this kind of cream color up here, which is kind of this yellow. But I might just add a little bit of yellow ochre here, because that's like a yellow, but a little more muted yellow. And maybe I'll use that even within the greens here, possibly. And then within these dark areas, there seems to be a little bit of a burnt sienna color, and which is really a dark orange, but slightly tinting. It's not dominant at all, but slightly tinting. I'm going to put that in here like that. And then there's the green. So a permanent green or a hooker's green. I have a hooker's green would be good. A Viridian is a little more of a blue green. So you'd have to, if you only had the Viridian, you have to put some yellow in it to make it a little bit more of a yellow green. But I'm going to go ahead and use this hooker's green. Or you could use maybe like a permanent green light would probably also work. So I'll put those in, and just in case, I might add a tint of a magenta. I'll put a little bit of this either rose red or a rose magenta color on here. Okay, so what we want to do now, and those will be the colors we'll use, kind of based on what we're seeing here in the picture. Okay, now what we want to do now is we're going to make a value scale. And so I'm going to start with the darker value of the scale and work to a lighter. Now the darkest value really that we're going to work with here is probably going to be this phthalo blue. The green's also fairly dark, but the phthalo blue is really dark. So I'm going to use that to make a decision as to how dark is our darkest darks going to be. So if we look at this isn't like it's black, right? Or like really dark, but this is the darkest area here. So, so if I establish my darkest darks, then I can just move myself towards the lighter values. But that gives me the key or the base by which to figure out the rest of the values. I'm going to take this phthalo blue, put some here. Okay. Now, if I just go really intense blue, it's going to be very, very dark. So I'm going to maybe lighten that up. And put a little bit there. So if I look and take that and I match it to here, and if I squint, so if you squint, it really helps you see how dark a color is. So I'm going to add a little bit more. It seems to be a little bit light, maybe about like that. And that looks about right. Maybe add a little water, make it a little lighter. And then I'm going to put this blue here. I'm going to use that as sort of the basis for that value. Okay, so I don't want it really dark. I want it maybe about like that. Okay, so now what I'll do is go to my green. I'll put this green in another area here. Okay, and I'll test that here and see how dark that is. It's about the same, so it's not bad, but I need to get enough pigment. So if I add water, sometimes you have to go back and add pigment, right? So let's see what that looks like. Now, what you're doing is that you can try to match the value of these colors by squinting. The squinting takes away the color, and you can kind of see how dark they are. And that's really a good method. It seems kind of bizarre, but it's really basically kind of the best way to do that. So if you squint at it, it looks like the green's a little bit lighter. Maybe I'll take a little bit out, a little bit. Okay, so that looks maybe pretty close. It doesn't have to be painted like super aesthetically. It's just mainly you're trying to get the value the same. Okay, so those two look pretty close, more or less, maybe a little bit less. Okay, now we're going to go down. This is going to become very important because when you paint an area or a shape, you can paint a couple colors into that area. They'll kind of fuse, and they look, if they have a harmony to them, they'll look very nice, but they got to be the same value. They have to be the same darkness. Okay, I'm going to take this burnt sienna, put a little bit more here. Now let's see how dark that is. So it's just by its nature, it's really not quite as dark. So to make it a little darker, and we can see this, we probably might not see this in this painting, but maybe in others, we could take a little bit of this phthalo blue, bring it into it, because it's an opposite color, and it will darken this up. Okay, it's pretty close. Going at it. Okay. It's about right, actually. It's a little lighter now than when I squint at this darkest area here. It's a little lighter. Let's try a little more paint here. Okay. Okay, put a little blue in there. Okay, so that darkened it up. That's closer to that value. So I'm going to go back to my green here and add a little more color to it. I can just paint over it because I think it's fairly dry. And then I'll do the same on the blue. And I think that will, so you see, we're taking some time to try to figure these values. So when we go to do the painting, we kind of know where we're at with our values. Okay, so those are pretty close. It's not bad. Okay, now the next step is to move down the value scale, add water to these colors, and create a 4-step value scale. So I'm going to come here with some water here. Okay, so that's a little bit light, it seems like, maybe a little bit more. Let that run down, that'll dry lighter. In the green. About right. It'll dry a little lighter. And then the burnt sienna. That's too light. I got to put more pigment in here. That's pretty good. A little lighter. Okay, now we'll go down to the next one. Add a little more water. Pretty good. Okay, so we've got to make this lighter, and we make it lighter by adding more water to the mix. Okay. Okay, so now we've got our light values. And oops, wrong square. That didn't work. Okay, so now this is going to be, of course, lighter. Okay. Pretty light. And then what I want to do, see if I'm dripping, I can just take and pull out the color by rubbing it on my napkin, and then just pick out the darks. That might be a little bit light. Okay, and then okay, so now we have our value scale from light to dark. If we wanted some area just to be white of the paper, that would be over here. But basically, the 4-value scale gives us a good guide. So when we want to paint an area that has 2 colors in it, we got to keep it in the same value, okay, depending on how dark the value is. And then what we'll do is we'll relate the values to different areas in the painting. Light, a little bit darker, then darker, darker. So we'll relate these to these areas, and then we'll mix, in some cases, colors together in the same value. And that's why we're doing this value scale.